Hello and welcome. My name is Amanda and I'm an IT recruiter, and today I want to talk about the secret sauce to getting the interview. Now picture this, you're scrolling through job posts and you see a post that looks exciting. It's exactly what you're looking for and you know that you can do it. Now how does the hiring manager know that you can do it? Obviously, the only thing he has to go off in that initial stage is your resume. And to get your resume right, I don't want to say it's an art. I personally think it's very intuitive, but that's after 6 months of already being in the recruiting process and seeing hundreds of submissions at this point and seeing what works and what doesn't work. And I want to share today what works for getting the interview. Now, I was going to break this up into 5 steps, but really it all comes down to this. Back to our example, how does the hiring manager know that you can do the job? Well, in the job post, he clearly highlighted the responsibilities that they are looking to be performed, the tools and technologies that they need someone to be proficient in, and usually even some nice to haves that would make someone an even stellar candidate. Now, if you look at those things, you might think, oh, I have that tool in my skills section of my resume, so therefore they should know that I can do it. That is not the case. What we want to see is a resume that clearly shows a chronological order of your work experience, as well as detailed description of the responsibilities that you performed and how you've used the different tools and technologies in your job history. We don't really want to see and clutter up the resume with different sections of tools and skills and all of these things that are kind of vague because we don't know where you've used them, how you've used them, or really what your proficiency is because it's just listed in a list. It kind of detaches itself, and anybody can do that, make a bulletin point of tools. It tells me nothing about your proficiency. So, to condense it all into one main idea, when you're creating your resume, you want it to clearly show your skills and experience, but not in such a way that it's devoid of context and meaning. So when you're listing your history of things that you've performed, and hey, maybe you don't have a ton of work experience and maybe you can't, there's only so much you can elaborate, but there's always more detail that you can provide that's ultimately going to explain why you're good for the role. The next point I want to mention is that maybe you've put a lot of work and you think your resume is perfect. That's great. But if you're on the job market and you're really trying to have a lot of options, hopefully you're applying to several positions. And you might think that because it's a good resume on its own, that anybody should be able to see that you're clearly skilled and experienced, but each job posting is different. Each client might be looking for a slightly stronger expertise in some area than another, and maybe you happen to neglect going into such detail on some certain tools in your one generic resume that you've created. When you are applying to several positions, especially the ones that you're actually interested in being put forth for, it's important to take an extra couple of minutes just to make sure that in your work experience, all of the responsibilities that you've had experience with that they're asking for in the job post are accurately reflected in a descriptive way so that when they look at it, or even if they use Control F to find certain tools, they can see the context with which you've used them in the past that will tell them that you're good for the position. So to simplify it, declutter the resume by having several different sections of lists of tools and skills. Instead, incorporate that into a nice description as to where you've used them in the past. As I mentioned, it doesn't have to, if you don't have an extensive work history, you can explain that you've used them within the context of projects you've performed at school or any certificates that you've learned and what you were able to achieve through that education as well. That's perfectly understandable. And another thing to note is that having gaps of longer than 6 months in your resume should be explained. Now, perhaps if it was years ago, it's not really relevant because really the most recent 2 years is the first thing that's going to be looked at. But if you have any significant gaps, it's worth to make a quick note as to why and give an explanation because that's something that hiring managers care about as well. Now, hopefully by following these tips, you'll be able to finally get your resume noticed by the hiring manager because it will be clear and obvious to see that you can do the job and that you are great for the position. I hope that this brought some sort of clarity to you. And if you're interested in knowing how I got a job in the IT industry with no work experience, please check out my previous video here. And I'm going to be making more on tips to land the interview once you get it and several other things like that. If you have any questions questions, please leave them down below. I would really appreciate if you like and subscribe if you want to hear more, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.